August 17th, 2021, Amplitude releases their self-proclaimed magnum opus, Humankind, a game I've been following since 2019 when they announced it in August that year, and I have to say, I love Humankind. It's not a perfect game, but it's an extremely enjoyable one. After almost a month of playing it, I think I have a pretty good feel on the release/near-release version of what Amplitude considers to be their magnum opus. When it comes to video games, the supplementary material is a huge factor in my enjoyment of the game. Be it official promotions or fan-made works, the quality of the supplementary material helps keep me into the game when I'm not even playing it, or have stopped playing for whatever reason. For example, I don't really play League of Legends anymore, but at least the supplementary things like the lore cinematics are great and keep my mind on Runeterra. Except not really anymore since the Ruination sucked. And they cucked my boys Maokai and Yorick out of their story. And it seems like Zahn's story is going to move on without the most important character and best hero in the lore, Urgot. But enough about bad games. We were talking about Humankind, and Humankind has some pretty top tier trailers. Trailers? That's what these are, right? The Lucy trailer perfectly shows off the player fantasy of Humankind, as well as some of the hilarity of ahistorical concepts that happen all the time in historical 4X games. It perfectly encapsulates what it's like being an immortal, leading your people throughout the ages, while displaying some of the silly elements that always arrive in games like this. Like that god tier scene with the samurais fighting entrenched French soldiers in the coast of the Indies. And the rendition of In the Hall and the Mountain King works perfectly with the trailer, and the changes of music when the era changes in the trailer places it in top tier when it comes to video game supplementary material. And the launch trailer with the Brazilian and American astronaut fighting each other is just hilarious and is an instant classic. Although it doesn't have much to do with the game itself. Yet? DLC 1 hinted in launch trailer confirmed? The extended first turn, known as the Neolithic Age, is a huge advantage that Humankind has over its predecessors. The first era of the game kinda works like the Vultures in Endless Space with their involuntary nomad homeworld trait, or a land version of Coupe's Voyage from Civ 6, which consists of scouting around looking for a good place to settle with some added objectives to help the game move along. It's also pretty cool that the Neolithic Age is basically a different game where units work differently as they hunt and pillage land for food rather than money. There are a few issues, like how population is extremely easy to get, and how it's kind of flawed that 2 of the 3 stars loop together, as the hunting star also pushes the population star, since hunting gives you food, which gives you more population that makes it easier to hunt with. Overall, the Neolithic Age is a great mini-era that adds a lot to the early game, which is extremely important since statistically most games only last the early to early mid-game. Honestly, science has had it way too good for far too long in 4X games. Finally, we're not chained in progression because our civilization is made of chads who don't need to know how to tell time with calendars. In all seriousness, it's great to see progression expanded upon and experimented with, and to finally see the King of X's not being all important. With the de-emphasis on science and extra emphasis on literally everything else, new strategies can emerge. You get rewarded for going wide. Like, really rewarded. Like, god damn, wide is actually so strong compared to tall in this game. Amplitude got that money victory from Endless and decided to make it a form of progression with the Merchant Star. And yeah, you can be a nerd in research, I guess. It still gives you progression, and if you aren't doing some crazy rich strats, it probably is one of the fastest era stars to get. Or, hear me out, you get a friend and have constant skirmishes with your troops trading kills, as it gives both of you unit kills for your military star. But it also helps cull your population, making it cheaper to produce population as now you have less people, so it costs less food to make more population, feeding your population star. And with this, we have created a dystopian industrial military complex in ancient times. The era system star is great, and I hope it becomes a staple in 4X games from now on, as it prevents Science Turtle McGee from not playing the game and science rushing with minimal territories, as well as encourages player interaction with the military star. However, peaceful interaction stars would be appreciated as well. Probably one of the best features for aggressive players like me is the implementation of the vassalization system. It's a way to finally play aggressive and not completely ruin the game for your friends, as things are not over for them, and they arguably lost nothing from the war, and they can be in a better spot than before they were even vassalized. It's always the worst to invite someone to play a 4X game just to kick them out soon after because they were in the way of your militaristic expansionist map painting. Now, you have a way to interact and exploit people's lack of defense without actually destroying them and everything they made, or reducing them to a shadow of themselves. And the vassal has a chance to fight for their freedom, but why would they, since they get all the luxury and strategic resources that the overlord has, along with the protection of the army that just stomped through their territory from their liege, all for the low price of some gold that they weren't going to use anyways per turn. It is like that famous Spartan quote, "How far the Persians have traveled to rob us of our poverty." Except I'm the Huns and I actually did rob them of their poverty. Vassalization is a great system as it allows me to be a dick and go to war with people for the military stars, but not be a douche and destroy what my friends have made or kick them out of the game that we're playing together. It has become kind of hard to list out the rest of the things that overly impressed me or made a huge impression on me while playing Humankind in larger sections, since most of the things go on the lines of "I like this" because I like it, I don't know. So this section is dedicated to some of the small miscellaneous things that I really liked. The civic system is nice, and the random civics do lead to interesting gameplay opportunities and may sway you to do actions you otherwise wouldn't. The biggest example of this is ransacking with the powerful war slave civic. I do also really enjoy the specialist cultures like the Teutons with their religion-focused legacy trait and the British with their vassal-focused colonial office, as they help connect multiple systems together and give you a larger bonus than the other isolated system options. And yeah, there's the obvious, building and shaping your overall empire archetype as you play is great, and the persona system is really cool, and it's fun making your own custom leader, and I would say it'd be fun to go against your friends' personas in AI games, but they haven't linked their accounts yet, so I actually don't know if that's true. It is kind of hard coming up with stuff that I really enjoy without saying I like the whole game. So let's move on to what people actually came here for, the more negative aspects of the game and stuff I have a gripe against. Humankind has some issues when trying to clarify mechanics, like when selling a geyser in range of exploitation. Are you losing the science it generates or not? Because the FIMS indicator only shows food and industry, but there is no warning that you are losing the science of the tile. How do you know how much faith generation you're competing with when it comes to determining the religious head? You can easily see how much faith each territory is making, but there's no way to compare your faith production to other cultures, or at least no way I could find. What causes a culture's sphere of influence to grow? Okay, maybe that one's kind of obvious if you think about it, but how much influence is needed to regain control? How much influence generated is equivalent to 20% more than everyone else in that territory? What about the fact there's no way to find out you get extra influence per turn by having max stability? How can I tell how much FIMS a specific connected territory is giving me? Hovering over the admin center only tells me how much the admin center itself is exploiting. It doesn't tell me how much the territory would provide if it was its own city. How do trade routes even work? And how do we get diplomatic badges? And what does a breathtaking named natural structure even do? Why is readying up in multiplayer so subtle? It's not a clarity issue now, but it always just feels so off readying up and seeing almost no change. And it did cause a lot of confusions when I first started playing the game with friends. While this is not inherently a bad thing, since Humankind is its own thing and we shouldn't compare it to its older brother for simply not being Endless Legend, some of the changes it made between the two games makes Humankind feel extremely empty compared to Endless Legend. Also, media doesn't exist in a vacuum and people have killed games with actual 0 IQ smooth brain comparisons. Trade is in a horrid state compared to the elegant market system of Endless Legend. However, that deserves its own section. Heroes have been removed, so basically remove the concept of generals and city advisors. This causes money to be only useful as a replacement to industry, since there's really nothing else you can spend money on, as well as getting rid of some of the strategy and player choice of how to approach the early game. Do we want to make our soldiers stronger in combat and give them some extra exploration utility, or focus on building up our first base? And now in Humankind, all of that has been replaced with nothing. And now, at least to me, Amplitude seems to be in a really weird spot, since their magnum opus may not really seem so magnum if they had added features from the other less important opuses later. Also, what happened to spying? Currently, the only way to benefit from other cultures is by being behind them enough where they influence you. And even then, it might be just them forcing you to pick one of their civics or face a huge stability penalty, or the actual good osmosis event where you get to research their science for gold or gain a substantial science boost. The player agency of gaining off your rival's successes is gone and makes Cold Wars extremely boring and slow, as neither side has options to provoke each other or get slightly ahead of their rival without a full-out war. No stealing money for science, no crippling their population, or any other game-warping spying options from Endless Legend. Honestly, I hope these features were deliberately not brought over from Endless Legend and that Amplitude doesn't sell them to us in DLC. There are only 3 religions in Humankind, but really, there's only one real religion, and you could pick a weird second one near the end of the game. Polytheism is leagues stronger than animism, and there's no point of ever picking animism. Animism falls way behind polytheism simply because it's so much easier to connect the territory compared to getting 5 population. As long as you're not going for a single megacity, the influence price per territory is so much cheaper and faster to accomplish than the food price per population. Per population may have an advantage in the far off late game, But by then, religion's already over. It's already been decided many years ago. The only time where animism is useful is that if you're losing the land grab game, or you're doing some horde setup for the Huns and Mongols. Also, the flavor of religion feels very boring and uninteractive. Your choice seems to be very meaningless and doesn't really lead to a fun ahistorical or historical events. Take religion and paradox games like Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis. Each religion feels distinct and unique and causes extremely different gameplay, to the point where you're kinda playing a different game based on which religion you follow. And even in Civilization, where you can at least interact with the system and have religious debate wars with missionaries and inquisitors, but then we get to Humankind and the religion there is just kinda there. There is no real player agency. It's a background element that gives a boost occasionally, and that's kind of it. It can draw some grievances and give you some war score, but it is the same as any other grievance and doesn't lead to anything that can be compared to the great religious conflicts throughout history. Not to mention, it usually makes the most sense to just change your religion to whatever religion is winning, so you can just leech on their bonuses, since the leader or founder of the religion has no inherent bonus over the followers, and they're gonna pick good tenets anyway since they use the religion as well. The tenet system also ends way too quickly. It doesn't take too long for a religion to reach 165 followers, especially if it starts snowballing and people give up on their religion. By late classical age, the interactive part of religion is basically over, and you just kinda sit there and do nothing with the religion system. I would love to see religion expanded upon and become more interactive. First of all, we need to add some fame bonus to religion, as leaving behind the most popular religious belief system is leaving a huge mark on humankind. It makes no sense to me that being the founder or religious head of the religion that's followed by all of humanity doesn't give me any fame. It also gives some incentive to people to not straight up abandon their religion once somebody gets ahead. Next, we need to have some sort of religious head bonus to the tenets. Just a little something that will help out the religious head more than everyone else. This will make the role of religious head way more impactful, as they now have an advantage over people due to their faith reduction rather than being at the same level as everyone else. This will also encourage religious competition since people will fight to keep their head of religion bonus. Adding some more ways for players to generate faith or even make faith bombs would make the system feel way more dynamic. Hell, maybe even add some faith-focused cultures to expand upon the religion system. Like imagine this, being able to consider territories as holy lands that produce a ton of faith, but are also faith jackpot for any other religion if they take control of it, or some way to establish something like the papacy and paradox games, making a religious form of the vassal system, but with extra tenets being given to the members of it. Trade in Humankind is in a pitiful state. The buyer has complete control while the seller just has to sit there and take it. You can't even control the pricing of items, so you can't even abuse the fact that the only source of copper or any other resource luxury or strategic on your continent. Trade with real players has been gutted, as the rigid system that is in place doesn't allow for creative or under-the-table deals. Early game trading is ridiculously good for the buyer, as they get benefits of the luxury when it's most impactful, and they don't have to waste their early game turns or influence, which are way more powerful than the money spent getting the luxury in the early game. The lack of a global market also really makes the trade scene feel really empty, extremely so if you compare it to Endless Legend. Although, the system would not completely work due to how resources are static in Humankind, but come on, we can't have a mercenary or troop market? Like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that we can't buy and sell armies from other empires, but we can still do it for independent people. Why are independent people the only source of money-only military power? And whatever happened to trading technologies? Without it, there's no non-confrontational way to support your ally in a war against another player. There's no way to make sure that the weak links of Alliance can stand on their own. And why can't we buy and sell territories to each other? I can get not selling cities, but come on, we can't sell land we don't want for some profit. Why can't we do some Louisiana or Alaska purchase stuff in the New World continent? Sellers should be able to set the prices for each resource and even have the power to up the price for each additional copy of the resource, since resources are static and do not get consumed. We should also be able to restrict the sale of each individual resource if we so please. Just because I want to make some extra money selling copper to the Assyrians doesn't mean I also want to provide them with the horses that they can use to pillage me with. Or maybe I don't want to give my opponent a significant money boost by trading away my gold, but I'm fine with them taking my mercury or silver. And please, 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 just add a mercenary market. Sometimes I don't want that extra population from disbanding my units because my cities are already overpopulated. A world market would also be really nice, as it could be a way for diplomats and merchants to finally get some extra fame, as being the one to establish it would be a pretty monumental thing. But of course, for a system like this to be useful, Humankind needs to have some sort of diminishing resource, which I doubt Amplitude will add. Let me get this clear, I'm not someone crying to nerf a strat that beats me, I'm someone who uses the Huns regularly, and I recognize that they're laughably overpowered. It's like picking Akuma in Street Fighter 2 or Colin in Advance Wars. Originally, I wanted to talk about the Huns and Mongols, but the Huns are so broken that I've actually never played the Mongols before. The Huns' ability to instantly raise at least 88 military power for 75-ish influence and 4 population is actually insane. They get the ability to rush down everybody in the new era before proper defenses are even possible. But if the person was planning to go on Huns by picking one of the super synergy cultures from the ancient era, it is actually impossible to defend from their Hunnic rush. While the Hunnic horde unit is fairly weak individually compared to their cavalry counterparts, you should only be getting them in groups of 4 and abusing the Ordu. If you're not, you're throwing. The value that Hunnic hordes provide in turns or money, and even food, since outposts scaled separately from cities and population growth, is actually insane when you compare them to literally any other unit in the game. Well, with the exception of the Mongol horde, which works in the exact same way. And if your continent was cursed enough and you managed to block everyone off from horses, you can play through and conquer with no one being able to defend themselves from you. That being said, even with competition from other competent cavalry units, unless you fuck up horribly, they can't hold a candle against the waves and waves of Hunnic hordes, or a single battle with reinforcements. But they aren't just insane combat units, they're also the strongest expansion unit in the game. A Hunnic horde can settle by killing their unit and making a 4 population Ordu. Oh wait, a 4 population Ordu? I can make a Hunnic horde from that for 75-ish influence! And now you have a 4-stack horde and a new territory for 77-ish influence. But of course, why would you ever do that if you can just win the game already by vassalization or conquest? Which leads to the problem of the Mongols. The game's already over if somebody competent picked the Huns. I bet they are probably as broken as the Huns, but without the surprise factor of hundreds of military strength coming out of nowhere, unless you somehow got to the medieval era before the Huns, and have a lot of 4 population outposts, and they aren't crippling you beyond belief. Honestly, not too sure what can be done here. You nerf the horde's military power and then the Huns are really lame and weak. They're already sacrificing the development by having a weak city with tons of outposts. If you increase the influence cost to make them, the only thing that gets accomplished is that the Assyrians become the only culture that can full on Hun rush. I'm not too sure what making a horde to Ordu nerf would do, as I never really use them since I usually claim everything as the Assyrians anyways. War and its outcome in Humankind has some small issues that make things feel really clunky. Taking territories from other empires as part of a treaty is very confusing, as it's hard to tell which territory is which. We were given territory names in the treaty screen, but once that territory has been connected to a city, you don't get to see the name on the map. Your map does hover over it when you click on it in the treaty screen, but the map is under the treaty screen and is blurred, and it doesn't help if the territory is small or bordered by many other territories. When you're offering your own surrender, why can't you go over the war score? You're the one deciding what happens to your empire. It can sometimes be smarter to surrender early and offer the demands that the other party wants. Like if the Huns are coming, and you know that they want to make you a vassal for some income to support their hordes. It would be so much smarter to just roll over and give up your freedom so you don't have to waste your population defending from a war you can't win. How come there's no option to sack or raise cities? Like, not just the one from players, but from independent people as well. I want to build more outposts to raise more hordes, but I can't because some dumb AI put a city there. Is the city just too large to burn down? Then why can't we just have everybody move out and live in some other part of the territory? Speaking of the cities of the independent people, why do they have 0 defense for the first couple of turns after settling? Having basic vision control of the map means you can get cities for free with your scouts, as just touching the land in this early state gives you it. Why even have the aesthetic passive of dealing with independent people easier and paying less influence to assimilate them when basic scouting gives you them for free? Basically, make it easier to see the names of attached territories, maybe allow us to rename them if we so wish, allow people surrendering on their own accord to also choose how much they want to give up to the other party, which then can be accepted or denied by said other party. And please just let independent people defend themselves. They are literally just free cities and discounted outposts. Like I said earlier, I love the vassal system. It allowed for aggressive players to conquest against their friends without destroying them and everything they built. One of the worst parts of playing an aggressive culture, race, empire, or whatever in a multiplayer 4X game is that you need to destroy and eliminate your friends that you gather together to play the game that you're playing. Like, wow, thanks for inviting me so you can boot me from the game. Even more so if you're an early game aggressor like the dragons rushing someone down in the first few turns of Endless Legends. However, vacillation is kinda weird from a meta player standpoint, as now the weaker player is rooting for their overlord to win more and vassalize more people, as it means more resources for them. It turns the game to a very much cooperative one, even though both sides were just at war. Which is even more strange since you can get closer to empires that you were previously rivals with than the ones that you've always been friendly with. Not to mention the vassal system is kind of one and done. You just kind of forget about it and now passively have more or less money per turn and a lot of resources. We should be able to make alliances similar in power to vassals, two cultures on equal footing where they share resources and maybe have some other kind of bonuses. Maybe it costs them both influence per turn or something to keep it, but allows both cultures to act as one in war and other ordeals, kinda like how a vassal and liege does. Vassals and lieges should also get some extra interactions with each other and be able to change the term of the vassalization through events or diplomacy. Things like trade with other nations or increase tribute and the such. I think relationships in general should be expanded upon more, and Amplitude should do their own spin on the Federation system that's in Stellaris. Allow people to work together more closely than alliances for extra boost towards specific focuses, kinda like making a Holy Roman Empire or a China tributary state or a Papal States kinda thing. I have already expressed how I like the persona system earlier, however there's a few things that I want tweaked. First of all, let me choose what clothes my persona is wearing while not in game. I find it really silly that I'm forced to wear the clothes of the culture I pick last. I just want the guy on my menu screen and the guy people see when they use my persona to look nice. Why do the dev personas get the luxury of choosing what to wear while ours can't decide a default look? It would be nice if we can give our personas a cultural preference per era, or at least a focus bias. That way it feels more like we're facing against our friends when we do play against their personas. However, I can kinda see how that might lead to some samey games against the same people over and over and over again. Also, let us rename our personas and then have our username somewhere else to see who made it. Some people, like me, are not creating ourselves and are using characters as their personas. I just want to name my persona Rant, and I bet Frost over here wants to name his Lex Luthor. It would be extremely satisfying and funny seeing these characters as the characters' names, rather than the usernames of the person who made it. How about also letting us go against randomized personas? I'm a lazy person, and I don't want to switch the devs of personas every match to get different interactions. Let me have an option to fight against AIs to have a random face, name, and all the other persona attributes. I'm tired of fighting the same filler AIs over and over again. Also, who the fuck is 2D Kiri, and why did you replace default salt 4 for AIs? Whatever, fine. Add your E-celebs to the game if you want, Amplitude. However, please don't have them replacing actual historical people by default. Like, please, just add them to the end of the priority list or something. It's just extremely annoying to see some random non-historical person in the game that my friends and I didn't create. We legit thought it was someone random who got into our game when she first appeared. Now time for all the small things that are not large enough issues to have their own sections. Why is your Neolithic era legacy trait locked behind only one of the stars? It's a choice to add one food, one industry, or one science per population. A pretty powerful thing going into the ancient era. But it's only gained if you get the science star, which makes no sense to me. I would prefer a system where the first star you get gives you a trait based off that star. Population gives you food, hunting gives you industry, and science either lets you choose like it does now, or just science. Because as it is right now, it feels really strange that one star that you can miss gives you a trait that affects you throughout your whole game. Some civics are also just completely busted. More specifically, the ones that deal with territory. Like customary laws, 50% less influence costs for grabbing land leads to huge discounts in influence while being able to control the map around you at incredible speeds. All the while, codified laws provides almost nothing, as you can just capture independent people for free, and a minus 20% for attachment costs is an incredibly small discount compared to how much you're gonna save with codified laws. And inherited land rights is just straight up broken. Money is way easier to generate than influence, and for some reason, inherited land rights doesn't even scale as hard as normal influence buying does. AI is always picking cultures first is actually the most infuriating thing ever. It is actually so annoying getting beaten out by an AI to the culture you want, by the factor of an AI instantly picks its culture at the start of the turn. It makes blitz games versus AIs literally unplayable, as everybody picks their ancient culture turn 1, leaving you with the AI scraps, or just one option if you're playing with 9 AIs. The lack of player identity is a small issue that's kind of really annoying to me, because what you are called and your culture changes throughout the game, and it becomes confusing on what to call each other's empire. You can refer to the AI by their flag color, but that's just kind of lame. I'm thinking something along the lines of having the persona be part of the empire name, or letting us change the names of our empire. Old cities really suck. There is way too much infrastructure for old cities to build and catch up on, but new cities get them for free. This leads to scenarios where you just want to get rid of your old dead weight cities and settle on top of it, but can't because you can't physically remove cities from the map. Like, I don't know, just add some event where you can wipe out your city in a fire and you have a choice to rebuild on top of it, with or without better city plans. And maybe add a third option for brain dead Hun Mongol players like myself, where you let the city burn to the ground. Why are expansionist stars linked to connecting land only? I'm playing these Syrians, planning to go Huns. I only want outposts. Too bad, even though I control most of the continent, I have 0 expansionist stars, since it only counts connecting them. Please, Amplitude, just please let outposts count at a higher cost per stars or something. Why is my expansionist playstyle not supported by the expansionist reward system? The way how higher difficulties are handled is just frustrating. The AI is just as stupid as it was before, but now has a ton of cheats to help it snowball. To be fair, this is how it works in most games, but it doesn't stop it from being annoying. All it does is just makes the early game more difficult, since that's when the advantages matter, and causes an awkward split in strategies, since the harder difficulty single player games are essentially a different game from multiplayer. I'm not crazy, we're going to the moon in an expansion, right? Going to the moon in Humankind currently feels like nothing. To be honest, I didn't even realize I went to the moon when I first did. And despite the moon landing being essentially just a cultural one that takes up more space to build, it was the whole set for the launch trailer, and the loading screen. All the characters on it are clearly units and workers from the game. All of them except for the astronaut. It just makes no sense for Amplitude to put so much attention going to the moon when it isn't even the endpoint of the space race of the game, since that's settling Mars. I'm not exactly sure where they would go with the moon, because I feel like another map might be too much to manage, but I could dream that something crazy will come from the lunar or astronomy themed expansion. The main thing I want from DLCs is more cultures to be added to the game. Hopefully they be crazy and they reshape the way how you look at the game. I mean, look at Amplitude's DLC factions, each one is completely crazy compared to all the other factions. As for less crazy cultures, an ancient era nomad would be nice. It feels really weird flavor wise to settle for one era, just to be nomadic again for the rest of the game. I am worried and not too sure what Amplitude can do for DLCs, since they are restricted by history and can't do cool shit like add giant elemental beings that are constructed like districts, but I have the utmost confidence that they will blow my mind. But why even wait for Amplitude to make expansions? I mean, they already said that they're gonna add modding tools to Humankind, and who knows, maybe I might even participate in the modding scene. They already stated they want to add some really cool modding tools to Humankind on release. They didn't, but it's getting there. These tools will allow you to change game values for balancing or to change or add new content like technologies, civics, units, or even cultures. Change localization and text in the game. Reuse 3D and 2D assets for your new content. Import 2D UI assets for new content. Change AI code so you can use other modded content. And a map editor. And I mean, good enough for me. I already have some ideas for cultures to add as a mod, but that's for another day. Really, I just really hope Humankind modding takes off, since modding always makes a game better. And yeah, that's been my experience with Humankind. I love the game, and it's been the only game I've been playing since release. I really want to play a new Pathfinder game, but I just have a need to play more Humankind. If for some reason you're still watching this video and you don't have Humankind, buy the game. It's worth the money. Even though it's kind of expensive for a 4X game with no DLCs, it's pretty good. And to everybody still watching, see ya, I'm gonna go search up which Smash B costumes boned.